Hello.
Hello.
Okay. I wasn't sure if I had to use the camera. I'm actually in bed right now, but I can turn it on if you want me to.
Thank you very much for agreeing to do this interview with Tonitruale because I've been chasing down an interview opportunity with Beach Fossils for the longest time. So I'm
Oh,
glad it's
nice.
actually happening now.
Yeah. Thanks.
You're welcome. My pleasure. I wanna start talking about the other side of life immediately because it rained where I am, and to me that's the perfect rainy day album. And I immediately started playing that. It's almost like a Pavlov dog complex thing, you know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah. Yeah, of course.
But if we look past that album, like, it's been 6 years since Somersault and Bunny, the album that you just recently released. So I
Yeah.
was wondering what prompted you to return to crafting entirely fresh material after that break?
Well, I was already working on Bunny when we made The Other Side of Life,
Mhm.
but it was like since there was COVID lockdown, I couldn't be going to my studio. And it was my idea to have like a jazz ballads album for years actually. So by the time, I wasn't able to do anything, I was just kind of stuck inside. I was talking to Tommy Gardner, who's my old drummer, and he's like a Juilliard trained jazz musician. He's one of the most talented people I've ever met. And I asked him if he wanted to make this album, and so we worked on it remotely. And just like send him a list of songs, and he would send me recordings on the piano and ask me, how I thought it sounded. And, if I liked it, I'd give him the green light, and he would, put sax and bass and other things on it. And yeah, it was great. It's the only album I've ever released where I don't play any of the instruments. I just sing.
Well, I know that you like jazz, but I also wanna talk about punk because I know that you were like a kid who was like, "Well, fuck authority and God, ugh, blah," which is
Well, I still am.
well, that is very Kurt Cobain of you, I might add. But,
Oh no, Kurt Cobain's a poser and a sellout.
I mean, I would not consider Kurt Cobain to be a sellout, but, you know
He's like the biggest sellout of all time.
you think?
But he was just obsessed with being a celebrity.
Well, so it's kind of like the Andy Warhol complex, right? The fame
Oh, I
complex.
have huge respect for Andy Warhol though, because his whole thing was about selling out, which I think is like really cool. He was like
Yeah,
very
it's
upfront about it
at
from the
least it's, like,
beginning.
genuine, so he was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm only going to be focused on being a celebrity, and that's what I wanna do," so
Right. And yeah, exactly. And I love that. I have like tons of respect for him for that.
that is very interesting because, for me, Andy Warhol is, like, the downfall of society, and that started with him, but to each their own.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to argue that, but I still respect him.
Going back to punk, that's good to know that you're still like that because it makes my question more relevant. I was wondering how you balance between your personal taste and maintaining the essence of your artistic stance in Beach Fossils because I think like in Beach Fossils we don't really see that angst as pronounced, maybe except your live shows because people mosh pit their asses off, which is very cool.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, my lyrics are still, it's just true to me. It's just true to who I am. I try not to filter like what I say in my lyrics. And, I don't think aggression necessarily has to be hand in hand with any of the other ethos that I have. And I spent, you know, most of my musical life before I started Beach Fossils making angry music. And after a while I felt like there wasn't anything more that I could contribute to it. It felt kind of like stale, and it was like everybody was doing it at the time. Everybody that I had played in bands with was all just playing the same kind of music in other bands, and, um, it just felt boring to me at the time, so I wanted to start making something that was, like, leaning into, you know, making something more beautiful and something that was more, mellow, and, you know, I record my music alone for the most part, so I get into, like, a state of mind that's a little more chill and meditative. I mean, I still make a lot of, like, very aggressive music, but I just don't release it. It's just for fun, it's just for me.
And I know that you're not really, into that whole pigeonholing your music to a certain genre kind of musician. So I would imagine that you'd be able to switch up whenever you wanted with other projects or even with Beach Fossils. And I imagine that being signed to your own label must bring a different dynamic to things. So do you feel like it takes the pressure off of making certain creative decisions?
In some ways, yeah, I mean, I can put out whatever I want, which I really love, and, you know, I've put out 2 other side projects of mine on Bayonet as well, so it's like I have that outlet to kind of release whatever kind of music I want in other styles if I feel like it, and, you know, yeah, there's no pressure, you know, to do anything that's not what I love and what I want and on my own time.
So there's no one telling you that you have to do a little dance for TikTok to generate more streams.
I never do that, but yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I don't
that's
have.
amazing. How very lucky of you. Not a lot of musicians can say that. The lush instrumentals in your music like immediately conjures like a cinematic experience for me. I was wondering if you like what are you inspired by outside music for your own music? Are you like a movie buff? For example, do you ever make music having like a cinematic approach in mind?
I think when I'm working on music, I do always have, like, visuals in mind, but I think the biggest inspiration for me working on music is just, like, pure emotion, like, just
Mhm.
sitting down with the instrument and, like, that is the same as, like, writing in a journal or something, you know? It's like I'll be thinking about an experience that I had, and I'll be, like, writing or a song to, like, soundtrack that experience. Even if that's not what the lyrics end up becoming, the music for me is, like, truly just emotion, so, like, you know, I won't release a song if I don't have, like, a really huge emotional connection with how the instrumental sounds.
Well, do you feel like you convey emotions through instrumentals other than lyrics mostly?
Yeah, I mean, I spent a lot more time on the instrumentals than I do the lyrics. That's the most important part to me, you know, getting a bass line that I really love and then kind of layering guitars and other instruments on top of it. Like that's the most important part for me. Um, which is funny because for most people it's like they're just listening to vocals and lyrics, and for me that's always kind of like an afterthought.
To me, another project that makes me feel that way is Wild Nothing, which is another project that has that like cinematic completion in my mind. Which you have collaborated with like him a lot of times, and he's a good friend of yours, if I'm not mistaken. So I was
Yeah.
wondering, like, what aspects of collaboration do you find the most inspiring? Because to me, what I understand is that you're someone who really likes to work alone, mostly, or with your band without having external opinions that much.
Yeah. Wait, sorry, could you could you repeat the question?
I was wondering what aspect do you find the most inspiring when you're working with other musicians outside your band?
You know, I feel like everybody has their own unique approach to songwriting, and when you're alone, you have one approach, and when you work with somebody else, not only does the collaborator have a completely different approach, but everyone you collaborate with, because they have a different approach, it forces you to have a different approach, and then it also forces them to have a different approach, and it's like you get 2 people together and all of a sudden it's like they're not even writing like they would at home, and it changes the way that you work, and those ideas kind of bounce off each other in new ways, and it sort of pushes you to work in like a completely, it's like everything gets flipped upside down, and it's really cool, like, you know, because I work with Jack and Tommy from my band a lot. And at this point, I understand the way that they work and they understand the way that I work. So, we have a really, like, natural flow when we all sit down together. And then when I work with somebody else, it's like I don't know the way that they work, and it's usually polar opposite of the way that I do, and it's always really interesting. I wouldn't say it's a challenge, but it's like it just like it's inspiring. It pulls something out of you that you wouldn't expect.
Do you think that you would be able to collaborate with someone that you admire without necessarily knowing how they work, or would you really have to know how they work and like who they are as a person to be more comfortable?
I think the most important thing is just like if I actually respect what they do. Because a lot of the times people in the music industry just like want to put you in a room with somebody and be like,
Yeah.
write a song with this person. But if I don't like their music and if they don't like my music, then like what would even be the point in like trying to work on something together? A lot of the times there's like kind of these things that are like created by the music industry that has no real chemistry in reality.
Have they ever done that to you? Like, have you ever been in that kind of situation where you were with someone that you didn't really know?
I I've had people set that stuff up for me before, and I've been like, "I'm not gonna do this." Like, "I'm really not gonna do this." Like, you know? Well, like, if I don't like someone's music, what's the point? It's like, if I'm g what am I gonna do? I'm gonna go in there, and I'm gonna get an embarrassing credit on somebody's song who I think sucks,
Yeah.
and, like, it's like, yeah, I don't really see the point in doing that. Yeah, I think people are just, like, really interested in, like, chasing money or popularity or something, but it's like, if the song is not good, who gives a shit?
If you make music with someone who is very popular, but it has nothing to do with your vision, then it's just like a time wasted, you know? And why were you
Yeah, absolutely.
so it takes way more out of your project than it will actually bring in, so it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right, for sure, yeah.
And I know that you're not someone who necessarily is, like, very moved by lyrics. I don't know if your opinion has changed, but at least that's what the podcast that I listened to told me, where you actually said it. So I'm imagining that it is the truth. But I really have, like, this thing with your music, which is very distinct that I love, and I think you're able to explore, like, platonic relationships and platonic nuances outside romantic love. And I was wondering, how does your personal experiences influence this focus in your songs?
Yeah, I mean, 100%, I mean, it's like, yes, there is something to be said about, like, a great love song because I think that being in love with someone and falling in love with someone, those emotions are, like, very important and overwhelming and really beautiful, but also it's like, you spend most of your time probably with your friends who, that those are extremely important relationships, and those really shape your life in a major way. And I think writing about, your friendships are just as important as like writing a love song. So, I mean, yeah, I've got songs where, I'll mention probably most of my friends, whether they know it or not. Because that's a part of my life, and I just write what I know. But going back to lyrics moving me. I am extremely moved by when I hear great lyrics, especially if it's accompanied by great music, I'll definitely be really moved. But I think it's rare that someone is actually a great enough lyricist to like write something really powerful and be able to put it in music because I mostly read poetry and I'm really moved by poetry, but it's hard to get that same feel in music without it sounding corny. It's a delicate balance.
And what is corny for you?
I don't know. That's the thing is like there's no rules to like what's corny. Um, something could be beautiful on paper and really stupid in a song, or something could be beautiful in a song and really stupid on paper. It's situational, there's not like a rule to it. It's just like you just know it immediately when you hear it.
Yeah. So who do you like as like poets? Who do you read the most?
Actually, I've got a few here on my desk. Ted Berrigan. This was like one that I was reading a lot when I was working on Bunny. I've had that book for like 10 years or so. Um, Another one here, I love Frank O'Hara.
Oh, Franco Hara.
Um,
I like
yeah, yeah, that's a good one. Oh, here's a great book. I don't know if you are familiar with this poet. this is a really
Oh,
great
yeah.
book.
I mean, I live in France, so I have to be.
Yeah, I think yeah, I think that in particular is like one of my favorite poetry books of all time. It's really great.
I have to come back to your lyrics because, I mean, even if that's not, like, the focal point to me, like, that's what made me fell in love with, like, Beach Fossils. And I think, which is, like, very refreshing in Beach Fossils and, like, the lyrics that you write is that you're not afraid to sound like a dick, and you're, like, very upfront with, like, embracing, your mistakes and everything, and I think it's, like, an amazing thing to see. So I was wondering, does, like, writing contribute to, like, some sort of, like, self-awareness or, like, navigate through your vulnerabilities in a way?
Yeah, I mean, that's like the whole thing for me, I don't go to therapy or anything, so that's I mean, that's why I probably like compulsively just nonstop write songs because it's like this is where I get it out. But not only that, I realized, when I was young that like when I first started playing music, I just started writing songs immediately, whether or not they were good. It was just important to me to like write songs. And if I went like a few days or whatever without writing a song, I would start to feel like really agitated. And I was like, I need some type of release. And then I sit down and like
Regular
make up a song and I feel a lot better. Yeah. So, it's like it's a way for me to sort of explore everything, but also it's like it's funny because I use my music as an outlet for like when I'm upset or confused about something, I will release that through song so I can look at it later and get a new perspective and see myself as an outsider. But I think in turn, since those are all my songs, it looks like I'm just like a fucked up person or I'm like really just like sad and struggling constantly. But
Mhm.
it's like this is the stuff that I'm battling when I mean, yeah, it's stuff that I think about every day, but it's like there's also a lot more to who I am than like just what's in those songs. That's kind of me exploring sort of the more confused and maybe depressed like sides of myself.
Yeah, but that's what makes it real, I think. Like when I listen to your lyrics, it's like, okay, so this is like a very honest and raw representation of how this guy is feeling. So it allows
Right.
you to relate to the song. You don't necessarily have to relate to every single song to actually like them.
Sure.
But I think that fact is also important. And I think with Bunny, you were a bit more open with your lyrics and not as vast as before. So do you think
Yeah.
it has to do with like parenthood? Congratulations on that, by the way.
Oh, thanks. I guess when you're a parent, you have less time to do things. So now I'm just like as direct as possible. And also there's something to be said about like when you become a parent, you kind of give a fuck less about things that like don't matter as much.
Yeah.
Um and especially like caring about what people think about you. I think that's like a big thing that happens when you have a kid is like you start to care about like you start to change your priorities and you care a lot less about like what people think about you in superficial kind of ways like that. So it's kind of easier to be more direct um than than before, I think, because it's like you're just like,
You don't give a shit as much.
no filter, yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering if, I mean, I'm sure that the answer is yes, but I want to know how so. It's like, did this new chapter of parenthood kind of impact your approach to themes like, I don't know, like the passage of time, nostalgia, friendships, relationships, the things that you tackle in your relationship? Like, have you found yourself reflecting back with a renewed sense of perspective, kind of?
I kinda always am, in a way that's, like, what Beach Fossils music is all about, like, I think I tend to be, like, a nostalgic person in general, and for better or worse, like, view the past with, rose-tinted glasses, and I'm always like, "Oh, those were the days," but it's like, those days were shitty. I'm writing about
I know.
being nostalgic for a time that was, like, much worse than things are now, but you can't help but to almost feel like, "Damn, uh, when I was, like, 22 or whatever, those days, like, were great." And they were, but they were also fucking horrible, and I was, like, struggling, and I was really broke, and things really sucked, but you still can't help but to be like, "Oh, that was kinda beautiful."
What are you
Yeah.
most nostalgic about then? if you have to like pick one thing?
I think your sense of freedom changes a lot, um, as you get older and have more responsibilities. I used to just, like, be able to do fucking anything, and it was like, especially when you're young, you're just, like, so naive and, kind of, like, just stupid and don't understand consequences, and you could just, like, can, uh like, treat your body like a garbage can, and you're like, "Yeah, this is totally fine."
Yeah.
And you get older and you're like, paying for that, and you're like, "Oh, this sucks now."
Did you start to pay for that?
Yeah, I definitely am. I have, like, certain health issues now that are because of, uh, treating my body like garbage for years and years on end, and, I mean, definitely touring takes a toll on you. It's like you're not sleeping, you're eating horribly, you're drinking every single night excessively. Um, and like, doing that for like a tour is okay, or doing that for a tour when you're like in your early 20s is fine. But like, I'm 37 and I'm still like eating like shit and not sleeping and drinking a lot on tour. And it's like, oh, this isn't the same as it used to be. This is, this
Yeah.
is way more fucked up
Yeah,
now.
of course. I was also gonna bring up touring because I know that like in your early career you weren't a big fan of touring, but do you think that like as you evolved, your relationship change a bit with touring or not at all?
Yeah, well, touring, like, when you first start out is really hard, it's like it's extremely difficult to there's it's hard even when things are, like, kind of nicer, like, even when you start to, like, have a crew on tour with you that, like, helps you load in and you're, able to kind of get more sleep and, be more prepared for things. It's still hard, but, like, when you're starting out, it's like, I was in this van that I bought that, like, barely worked. I bought it just for the tour, and, like, we were sleeping on floors every night, like, on stage, asking people, like, if they have somewhere we can stay, and,
Right.
you know, truly, like, spending, like, probably $5 at the most on food a day, and just, like, uh, literally not sleeping, and and just fighting, and, I mean, that is, like, really hard, like, starting out, and, I was like, the thing that gets you through that is being like is the show, because you play the show and you're like, "Alright, that was really fun, that was amazing, that's the reason to keep this going," and that part makes it feel really fun, and there also is an excitement to, like, it being a new band that's kind of like, "Okay, I'll deal with, like, the torture of, like, being on this horrible tour," and, like, the first tour we came back on, like, we didn't get any hotels, we would sleep in the car, we would sleep on floors, and, like, we came back and we had a total of $40 to split between the band, and it was like, "Okay," but I didn't feel upset about it necessarily because I was like, "Well, we fucking did it, like, we did a tour. All I've wanted to do my entire life is do a tour, and we actually did it," and I felt, like, inspired and excited more than anything. Um, I think that's another thing that comes with, like, being young enough to have, like, nothing to lose and just being excited about what's going on.
You know what's crazy about touring to me? Like it is wild how much is normalized about touring and the conditions
Yeah.
of it. Like you sleep in the floors, you eat like shit and everything, which makes it's so, like, respectable in my eyes, but sometimes I can't help but think, like, it shouldn't be that hard, you know?
No, it shouldn't be. I mean, bands shouldn't have to go through that. It's really like there's, like, barely any government funding for the arts in the
Yeah,
US, and, it's like people that wanna do it either have to come from, like, a lot of money
money,
already, or just, like, deal with the struggle, and it's fucking hard, and I've seen a lot of people who are really great, talented people just not want to tour, and the band sort of falls apart because they can't deal with how hard it is, and that's
and it
like
makes a
that's
lot
a
of sense.
shame.
Yeah, but also the thing is, like, I mean, I don't know, like a very harsh thing to say, but sometimes when you look at the current music industry, it's like there are a lot of like very rich kids who come from money, which is a good thing, of course. I mean, if you want to pursue music. But besides them, like the newcomers don't really have any space to, get their music heard, go on tours because it's like relentless now. It has
Right.
always been relentless in the industry, but now it's even worse, I think.
I think, well, there's kind of 2 sides to it, because on one end, it's, like, easier for people to get their music out there and get their music heard, because you can just record at home.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, before, you had to be somebody, like, doing the grind, playing shows all the time, then people finally hear you, and then you get signed, and then you can finally afford to, like, record some songs. So, like, I will say it's great that, like, having a computer gives you a recording studio instantly, or even having a phone at this point. Um, so, like, people are able to get their music heard, but the touring part, I don't think has gotten any easier. It's like that's still always gonna be really difficult, and now things are just getting even more expensive, and, you know, venues are still taking merch cuts, and, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just so expensive to tour, and I don't really know if there is an answer.
Like, I read an article about Animal Collective having to cancel their tour because they don't have, like, enough money, and in my mind,
Yeah,
but you are Animal Collective, like, the most loved indie band of all time. So if they're going
right.
through that problem, what are, like, emerging acts gonna do? So it puts things to perspective, like, in a very negative way.
I mean, I don't know Animal Collective's situation, but, sometimes their show starts to evolve to the point that they need a bigger crew on tour to be able to give the show that they wanna
Yeah.
give, and so it's like, that's very expensive. Buses are, like, twice as expensive as they used to be. So it's like, you could still tour, but it would be, like, a really minimal stripped down show, and it would be just, like, in a van, and it wouldn't be the same show that, like, people have seen over the years. So, I mean, I do understand that. It's like, technically, you could still play the show, but it would not be the show that, like, people are used to seeing.
Yeah, or maybe it doesn't just represent your artistic vision at all.
Totally, yeah, I mean, and that's fair. It's like, if your show should be a representation of what you want it to be, and, if that's not gonna happen, then what's the point of doing it?
Everyone has like their preferences. Like some people hate touring, some people hate writing lyrics, or like going
Yeah.
to the studio with like a producer. What is the part that you like the most?
Oh, I mean, I love touring, I really do. Like, I think it's amazing. I hated it at first because it was so hard, but, like, it is amazing, and, like, it really is, like I was saying before, like, no matter how shitty your day is on tour, like, when you get on stage, everything melts away, and that's, like, the most special thing in the world, and also, like, I love just writing songs and working on music. I'm constantly coming up with, like, new ideas, and whether or not I release it, um, it's still important to me to be writing on, like, a regular basis, and, if I'm not writing music, all I'm doing is listening to music. It's like it's truly an obsession. It really is, and, like, I never get tired of it, I never get sick of it. I always wondered, like, if there was gonna be a point in my life where I didn't not necessarily care about it as much, but, like, if it didn't mean as much to me, and that's never happened. Like, music has always been, like, the most important thing in my life, and, you know, it's like, yeah, I have a kid, and that's, like, the most important thing in my life, but also music is, like, shared with that. Like, I play music for my daughter constantly, and it's really cool to see how she's responding to the stuff that I like, and, it's like now it has, like, a whole new role.
So what do you make her listen to? Like hardcore punk bands? What do you make her listen
I
to?
I play literally every single genre for her, like,
That's amazing.
constantly. I
She's gonna
Yeah.
have a very eclectic taste.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. Whether she likes it or not, maybe she will later, but it's like, I think it's important to just, like, get kids exposed to all types of art and music, and last thing I would want is for my kid to grow up and see some art and be like, "Oh, that's weird." Like, I hate when people say stuff is weird. It's like, "Dude, this is just expression. It's not weird."
Yeah. I don't know if you like listen to a lot of new releases this year, but if you have, what was your favorite album of 2023?
Um, Probably Bar Italia's Tracy Denham.
Oh, that's really good.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, that's my most listened to album this year. It's like, I can put that one on and just listen to it beginning to end, and I can just have that on repeat. Like, there have been days where that's probably, like, the only thing I've listened to. I think they're so great.
they're really good. They're like my
Yeah.
favorite act that emerged in the last couple of years, I think. They're really, really good.
Yeah. That and, like, I also love their Double Virgo project. Like, I think that stuff's excellent.
Well, thank you so much for this. I've been such a huge fan of beach fossils since I was like 17. Yeah, since I was,
Wow, cool.
and now I'm 20. So you have been with
Yeah.
my life all this time. So thank you very much. And I hope you have an amazing day.
Yeah, thanks a lot.